Well, I was reflecting. I was out of town last week, and just reflecting over the last several months together. And at the beginning of Lent, we started a series called Idol. We spent the Lenten season thinking about what it is that the gospel comes to deal with, and why it is that we need the gospel, and we framed it this way: we need it because we become what we behold. And when we exchange the glory of the Creator for the lesser glory of any created things, we become diminished. We begin to resemble that which we reflect on and revere. We're shaped by what we give ourselves to in service. And so we unpacked what idolatry was, and then we moved on to 8 weeks of beholding, spiritual disciplines. How do we then behold Jesus? Because the same principle, we become what we behold, that defines the problem of idolatry, also points us to the solution of transformation in Christ. We were made to be God's imagers. We're made by God for God, and we're designed to receive the glory of God and reflect it back into creation. And so we need to align ourselves. And the disciplines are God's gift to do that. And last week, Dan did a brilliant job starting off our summer Psalms. This is the third year we're spending together in the Psalms. And it's truly a continuation of what we've been doing for the last 16 weeks. Spending time together this summer in the Psalms that we might behold God. And then in beholding God, we might become more and more and more like Jesus. Dan did such a great job last week in Psalm 133, and he did a beautiful job of showing how that psalm lays out that the fruit of people beholding God together is unity. One of the first disciplines we looked at was the discipline of community, that we're not designed to be independent and function alone. We're made by God to be interdependent. We're always going to be better together than we are by ourselves. And so there's this beautiful reality in Psalm 133 that the fruit of beholding God together is unity, and unity then is the environment that God has dedicated his blessings to manifest. So that there's experiences of God's grace and blessings that we're never going to experience by ourselves, because functionally they're only experienceable, if that's a word, in community. And I don't know about you. As I was listening to Dan's sermon and thinking about the design of God for community, my heart was just filled with longing. Like that's what I want. It's what I crave, to be a part of a family, of a people, to be in relationships where I'm known and where I know others, where I'm loved and I can love others. Like, this is what we're made for. It's how God has designed us. And so this morning, I want to continue to wrestle with that by trying to answer this question: what does it take, or maybe better, what kind of people do we need to be in order to enter into and experience that kind of community? Like, we long for it. We're made for it. It's offered to us in Christ. And yet, so often, we don't live that way. So what is it that needs to happen to us or within us that we might be the kind of people that are actually longing to and willing to enter into the kind of community that God has designed us for? Because, and I said this several weeks ago, proximity doesn't equal community. just being in the same place, being in the same room, doesn't mean that we're in the same spirit, that we're in the same heart, that we're sharing life together. So we can be together and not be together. There's a world of difference between being here, open and aware of others, ready to receive, hoping and longing to give, not wearing masks, playing no games, ready to be used by God for others' good. There's a world of difference between that and being here, managing your image, manipulating the conversation and the presentation of yourself to others, hoping to control and elevate yourself, ultimately ready to use others for your own advantage. There's a world of difference between those two realities. And it's not a difference that's obvious to the eyes. It's not a difference that's external. It's a difference of the heart, a difference of motive. And so I want to unpack this morning Psalm 62. Psalm 62. Before I get into the text, let me just give you a word about the genre. The Psalms are not texts about worship or texts about prayer. The Psalms are worship, and they are prayer. In other words, they're not written to give information about worship or about prayer or about God or about ourselves. They're written as instruction. They're written as an invitation into communion with God. Using the terminology we've been using, the Psalms are written to help us behold God, that we might become what we were always made to be, his imagers. So they're participatory. The thing about worship and prayer and many of the spiritual disciplines is that we don't learn about them and then do them. We actually learn to do them by doing them. And that's what the Psalter is. That's what this collection of prayers and hymns and meditations are. They're this standing invitation for us to enter into the worship of God's people, that we might become who he made us to be. Now, Psalm 62 begins with a superscription, and very often we just rush past them and ignore them. But it starts this way: to the choir master, according to Jeduthun, a psalm of David. So this is what we know just from that superscription. This is a psalm that was written by David, and then it was taken by Jeduthun. Jeduthun was one of three of David's primary worship leaders, to use kind of our terminology. There were three temple musicians: Jeduthun, Asaph, and I think it's pronounced Haman, but it always makes me think of He-Man. So there were these three that served, leading the descendants of Abraham, the people of Israel, the covenant nation, in worship to Yahweh. So David writes this prayer, this meditation, and then he gives it to the worship leader, and he puts it to music. And so we see right from the beginning that this is it's a personal, private reflection that is then shared to the community. It's meant to be experienced together. It works by yourself just fine, and it works together even better. So we're being invited just by this superscription, not to simply study this prayer, but we're invited to pray it. So let's join the ancient chorus and see what it has to say. It starts this way: for God alone, my soul waits in silence. From him comes my salvation. This is interesting. It's technically a psalm of lament, but it doesn't follow the normal structure of lament psalms. It actually starts where most of the lament psalms end. It starts with this just declaration of truth. One of the things that I want you to pay attention as we walk through this text is who David is talking to in the text. He starts out talking to everybody. He's talking to God, he's talking to himself, he's talking to anybody that'll listen with this declaration: for God alone, my soul waits in silence. From him comes my salvation. Now, the text doesn't tell us, as some of the Psalms do, exactly when in David's life he wrote this, but there's a lot of clues within it of the context, and many scholars, and I actually really believe this, that David wrote this most likely during his son Absalom's rebellion. And I think that matters for this reason. It's really easy to say when life is going well: God alone, my soul waits in silence, from him comes my salvation. It's really easy to say that when you're not facing struggle. But David doesn't write this after Goliath's been slain. David doesn't write this after winning another victory over the Philistines. David writes this when he should be enjoying the advantages of age and enjoying his family and ruling the kingdom that God has given unto him. Instead, he has to flee from the city of Jerusalem and hide once again in the hills from his own son. David writes this in a time of uncertainty, a time of grief, a time of fear, and it has to be a time of guilt. Because Absalom's rebellion doesn't come from nowhere. And in many ways, it's the consequences of choices that David made earlier in his life that are coming back to haunt him now. And so it's in this time of brokenness, uncertainty, grief and pain and shame and guilt, David sits down and he says, for God alone my soul waits in silence. From him comes my salvation. That word there that we see, alone, it's this really small little Hebrew word, ach. And it shows up in these 12 verses 6 times, over and over and over again. So much so that Charles Spurgeon, the famous preacher, nicknamed this the only psalm. Ach here is it's an adverb, and it has a double semantic meaning and range. So first of all, it's restrictive. So it means only or alone. But it's also assertive. It's an emphatic affirmation with a solemn truth underscoring weight. So it means surely or truly. So it's not just limiting it to God, it's defining it and announcing it as God. Surely, truly, only God is the one my soul longs for. For God alone, my soul waits in silence. The Hebrew here, dumaya, it can mean silence. It can mean stillness. It means to cease, to stop talking, to stop moving, to stop managing, to be still. It's not emptiness. It's not giving up. It's orientation. A soul aimed towards God rather than driven by circumstances. How much energy, how much focus, how much time do we spend reactively to the circumstances around us that are almost always out of our control, versus orienting, aiming, aligning ourselves to the one who made us for himself? The Hebrew is actually really interesting. There's no verb here. There's no verb here. The waits in silence, that's just been thrown into the English. Listen, this is what it literally says. Only toward God, stillness, my soul. Only toward God, silence, my soul. It's like the syntax, the grammar enacts the very stillness and silence it describes. For God alone, my soul waits in silence. The psalmist doesn't say my soul has become still or my soul is being still. He declares in this opening verse, in effect, my soul, stillness. There's no motion left in this sentence. The grammar itself has stopped striving. I can't think of a better picture of what I'm hoping this summer does for us in the Psalms. A soul so aimed at God that even the sentence describing it has ceased to churn. My soul towards God, stillness. From him comes my salvation. See, this is not the silence or stillness of emptiness. It's towards the person and fullness of God. I was thinking about it. What David is describing is what a compass does. When you first turn it out and the compass is spinning and it's looking for true north. And when it finds true north, what does it do? It stops. It points. It's found its true north. That's what David is describing here. A soul that has stopped spinning, a soul that has found its true north, its ultimate direction in God alone. For from him comes my salvation. Now, verse 2, he continues saying, he alone, there it is again, he alone is my rock and my salvation, my fortress. I will not be greatly shaken. So he gives us these two metaphors about what it means to be still and silent, to be directed towards God. He says God becomes our rock and God becomes our fortress. The word here for rock is sur. It's an inaccessible rock face, a crag or a cave that is immovable and out of reach of enemies. Fortress, misgav, is a high place, a position of security above the reach of pursuers. So David's saying, when I'm still in you, when I'm directed towards you, when I'm depending on you, you become like this inaccessible rock fortress, a high place that nobody can reach to, that where I'm protected and I'm safe in you. He alone is my rock. He is my fortress. He is my salvation. In ancient Israel, these words weren't just simply metaphors or abstractions. The tabernacle in David's day, and then in Solomon, his son's day, once the temple is built, becomes a literal place of sanctuary where an Israelite can run to. If he's being chased, maybe you've done something wrong and enemies are chasing you. In ancient Israel, you could run to the tabernacle, to the temple. You could go to the table, the altar, and there are the horns of the altar. You could grab the horns of the altar and you would be granted safety, refuge. I think David's pulling all of that imagery in. When I'm in the presence of God, when I'm in the sacred space, when I am still and silent, when I cease striving, when I'm with you, God, then I know salvation. I know rescue. That word salvation is the Hebrew Yeshua. It means rescue and saving. And so David is saying, the only one that ultimately can save me is God. He's not looking to his army to deliver him. He's not looking to his physical strength or his wisdom or his battle prowess. He is at this place where none of that is going to help him, and the only way forward is with God. He says it again. I will not be greatly shaken. So it's a great start. This declaration, this pronouncement, this announcement. God is the one that saves. And the way that we experience that is by stilling and silencing and orienting ourselves to him. Verse 3, things go south fairly quickly. Now David begins to lament. But once again, it's not a standard lament. Most laments are directed towards God. How long, O Lord? How long will you forget me? When are you going to move? David doesn't lament to God in this psalm. He actually laments to his enemies. How long will all y'all? I just spent some time in Houston. So, how long will all of you attack a man to batter him like a leaning wall, a tottering fence? How long? This is standard lament vocabulary, but he's addressing it to his enemies. How long are you going to keep attacking me? There's some irony here, right? Because he's just said, I'm in this high place. I'm in the fortress. I'm in the rock. I shall not be shaken. But now he finds himself in a place where actually he has been shaken. He's not in Jerusalem. He's hiding in the wilderness. His future is uncertain. He doesn't know what's going to happen because he's being attacked. And he says, how long will you attack to batter him like a leaning wall, a tottering fence? The imagery here is it's beautiful. He's like, I'm like a wall that's being battered and I'm still standing, but the structural integrity is not good. I don't know how many more hits I can take before I go down. So how long are you going to keep coming after me like battering me like a leaning wall, a tottering fence? He says, there it is again, all they want to do is thrust me down from the high position. Word there for high position. Literally, it's a word that refers to one's dignity, one's elevation, your standing. So the goal of the assault, as David sees it, is not simply physical. They're not just trying to kill him. They're trying to kill his image and his reputation. You got to understand, in the ancient Near East, maybe even more so than in our culture, identity mattered so profoundly. One's honor, one's reputation, one's name is the most important thing about you. So he says, you're trying to tear me down, to strip away my honor, my dignity, my glory. And then notice how they attempt to do it. They take pleasure in falsehood. They bless with their mouths, but inwardly they curse. You've heard this in the church before, right? Oh, bless their heart. You know how that functions, right? You can say the worst thing imaginable about somebody and then just tack on, oh, and bless their heart, and then we think it's okay. It's not okay. This is not okay. He says, listen, there's this reality. It's not outright violence. It's not in your face. It's the subtle behind your back gossiping and slandering and have you heard and did you see and what do you think about and then flat out lies. Maybe you've had that friend in your life, the one that when you're with them laughs at your jokes and tells you how great you are, but behind your back they're mocking you and belittling you. Maybe you experienced at work, a colleague at work who tells you how brilliant you are and how great your ideas are and then tries to steal them and take credit for them and tell the boss that you're just not quite up to snuff. This reality, the enemy that appears as your friend, but isn't. That's the reality that David has been living through. See, Absalom's rebellion didn't start with swords. It started with whispers. Absalom would stand at the city gates, and as the people would come in, as the elders would gather, he would whisper. He would plant seeds of doubt and distrust in his father. He would woo and speak words of honey and win people over slowly but surely. Always saying, oh, I serve the king, but everything he's doing is undermining the king. Eventually, Absalom comes to David and says, I need to go pay a vow. David's like, cool, go pay a vow. And then Absalom goes and gathers an army. And David has a messenger come to him and says to him, Absalom has won the hearts of the people. And so David has to flee Jerusalem before there's outright violence in the street. This is what David has been living through. And it actually worked. The plan of his enemies, the lies, the falsehoods, the whispers have become a mighty shout. So David, who 1 minute is saying, I will not be greatly shaken, is now shaken, not stirred. David's been thrust down from his high position. His reputation, his honor has been tarnished. It's been broken. And he's left once again hiding in the wilderness. And so in verse 5, he comes back to where he started. For God alone, O my soul, wait in silence, for my hope is from him. This is where grammar matters. Right? That's one of my favorite t-shirts. It's like, let's eat grandma or let's eat grandma. A comma makes all the difference. In this verse, it sounds exactly like verse 1. But where verse 1 is just declarative, verse 5 here it's an imperative. David is now talking to himself. He's talking to himself. God alone, O my soul, wait in silence. My hope is from him. It starts with this vocative, O my soul, followed by an imperative, be silent, be still, stop. For now, my hope is from him. See, the stillness and silence of verses 1 and 2, the bold declaration, I will not be shaken, it's gone. David has been shaken. He's lost his stillness. So now he has to talk to his own soul. And notice, he doesn't beat himself up. He doesn't shame himself or guilt himself, throw up a pity party. He directs himself. He leads himself. He's taken his eyes off the salvation offered in God, and now he has to reorient himself to look to God. I love what Martin Lloyd-Jones has to say about this in a beautiful little book called Spiritual Depression. It's worth quoting here at length. He says this. He says, have you realized that most of your unhappiness in life is due to the fact that you're listening to yourself rather than talking to yourself? So take those thoughts that come to you the moment you wake up in the morning. You haven't originated them, but they start talking to you. They bring to you the problems of yesterday. Somebody's talking. Who's talking to you? Yourself is talking to you. David shows us in this psalm, instead of allowing the self to talk to him, he starts talking to himself. Lloyd-Jones he writes this, the main art in the matter of spiritual living is to know how to handle yourself. You have to take yourself in hand. You have to address yourself. You have to preach the gospel to yourself. You have to say to yourself, like David, hope in God. Hope in God. That's what this psalm is doing. It's orienting and directing and leading our heart back to that which it was made for. Now, let me be clear. This is not positive affirmation, right? I'm good enough, I'm smart enough, and gosh darn it, people like me. It's certainly not the name it and claim it of the prosperity gospel or the fake it till you make it. It is the fight of faith. It is the fight of faith. It assumes that we've been given the freedom to direct our lives. It assumes that our feelings don't dictate reality, and that if we will direct ourselves towards God, God is happy to meet us and help us because he loves us and he's for us. So that's why he switches in verse 5 from my salvation is from him to my hope is from him. In verse 1, he's just declaring, he is my salvation. But now he says, my hope is from him. Hebrew tikva. It means expectation. It means to wait for, to look for. It's the posture of expectant waiting for God's action. It's orienting ourselves towards a future reality that's not yet visible. God is my salvation, but I'm not experiencing it right in this moment in the way that I need. So I'm hoping in him, in the salvation that only he can bring. Say that this is an honest prayer. Salvation is deliverance experienced. Hope is deliverance expected. For him, the crisis is not over. The enemies of verse 3 and 4 have not dispersed. The psalmist is not claiming resolution because he doesn't have it. He's holding on to what he knows against what he does not yet see. That is what soul stillness sounds like in the middle of a storm. Not it's finished, but my hope is from him. So having talked to himself, reoriented and realigned himself, restoring his hope in God, David continues in verse 6 with the same declaration as verse 2. He only is my rock and my salvation, my fortress. I will not be shaken, which is this is the craziness of faith sometimes. To once again declare, I will not be shaken when you've been shaken. But what he's saying is that, yeah, the circumstances around me have been shaken, but that doesn't mean my soul has to be shaken. Now that I've oriented, now that I've stilled and quieted myself, now that I'm looking to God, you can't shake me because he is my fortress. He is my rock. And then David concludes this section, verse 7. He says, on God rests my salvation and my glory. My mighty rock, my refuge is God. His rescue, his salvation, and his glory. The Hebrew here is kavod. It means heaviness, weightiness. It's substantialness. God is the one that gives me meaning. God is the one that gives me value. God is the one that grants me reputation, the only reputation that matters. God is the one that gives me any kind of glory I may ever experience. I can't lose what God has given me, and man can't take from me what God has given me. On God rests my salvation and my glory. So I think some of us need to hear that this morning so that we might be set free from the constant, never-ending quest for man-made glory. Like some of us are flat out addicts. We need people to like us. We crave affirmation and attention. Our mood, our experience of reality is completely determined by whether somebody says something nice to us or somebody says something mean to us. And see, one of the many problems of living for man-made glory is that it is never-ending because man changes constantly. It's never enough. It's never enough. You get 5 people to love you, that's great. But then you need 10. You get that 10, that's great. But then somebody else has got 20. Like it just never ends. See, but God is more than enough. The glory that God offers is more than sufficient, more than abundant. It's a call for us to really consider who and what we're living for and whose affirmation really matters in the long run. Now, verse 8 makes a turn in the psalm from the private to the public. David reorients himself towards God. He renews his faith. He's now resting in the glory that only God can give. And that moves him out of himself to consider others. So he starts talking to everybody. He then talks to his enemies. He then talks to himself. Now, in verse 8, he begins to talk to the people. Trust in him at all times, O people. Pour out your heart before him. God is a refuge for us. This experience of soul stillness with God, the salvation, the hope that is offered to David in God is not for David alone. It's for all. It's for everyone that God has called to himself. So now Now, as David is encountering and experiencing this reality, he's moved to invite, to welcome, and to call the people. Remember, I started with the question, what kind of people do we need to be in order to experience the beauty of community, the beauty that experiences God's blessing? I think David shows us here the kind of person that has stilled themselves, silenced themselves, oriented themselves to God as their hope, to God as their salvation, to God as their glory. That is the kind of person that is free to enter into authentic community. See, without that stillness and quietness of soul, without God being the source of our identity, our glory, our meaning, the one that we're looking to and looking for, other people are a threat or an audience. So you're either competing for the same glory that I am, or I need you to give me glory so that I can feel good about myself. Right? If I'm not getting my glory from God, then the only way I can get it is to be better than you, or to impress you or manipulate you in such a way that you give me the glory that I crave. I don't really love you. I need you. I'm not with you, I'm using you. Authentic community, love, becomes possible when our souls have been stilled in God. When our hope, when our salvation, when our glory is bestowed upon us by God, so that we don't have to look to anybody else to give it to us. So when I'm satisfied in God, I don't have to use you to be satisfied anymore. That's exactly what we see in David's call to the people. He says, trust in God at all times. Not just in favorable circumstances, not when it seems reasonable, at all times. In all circumstances. Trust in Him. Orient to Him. And then he says this really interesting little phrase, pour out your heart before Him. Pour out. Sapak. It means to pour out, okay? But it doesn't mean like a little bit. It doesn't mean pour a little here and pour a little there and keep a little for yourself. It means to empty. It means dump it out. Dump out your heart before God. Why would you hold anything back? Why would you not give it all to Him? Why would you just take some of your burdens towards God and leave some of your burdens on your own shoulder? Pour it out, because God is a refuge for us. This implies a total empty, nothing held back or managed. No, this is an exact opposite of how David's enemies acted in verse 4. They blessed externally and cursed internally. They were disjointed and broken. The community that is trusting in God, however, can be authentic, hiding nothing. One might even say they could be naked and not ashamed. They could be what we were made to be. Why? Because we've given everything to Him. And He's given everything to us. I mentioned Spurgeon before. I love what he had to say of this verse. He says, turn the vessel of your soul upside down in His secret presence, and let your inmost thoughts, your desires, your sorrows, your sins be poured out like water. Hide nothing from Him, for you can hide nothing from Him. Right? There's such a logic to this. And of course, We like to think that we're logical, but we tend not to live by logic, but to live by our emotions and our feelings and that sort of stuff. So we convince ourselves somehow, right? I can hide this from God. I'll cover this myself. The God who is omniscient, all-knowing, the God who is omnipresent everywhere, the God who nothing gets past. Somehow we convince ourselves we can sneak something past him. How can I give God just a little bit? The tragedy is that we keep holding that which we can't do anything about when God is ready for us to give it all to him. And in many ways, the psalm could end here. But David doesn't stop. In this final section, he names the two great alternatives to stilling our souls in God. He says, those of low estate are but a breath, and those of high estate are a delusion. In the balances they go up, they are together lighter than a breath. So he goes, this is the last section here is it's wisdom literature thrown into this psalm. He's giving us Proverbs, basically. And he starts this way with this Hebrew parallelism. The lowest people, the marginalized, the ones nobody thinks matters, they're just but a breath, a vapor. The people of high estate, the kings, the rulers, the mighty warriors, well, that's a delusion. They think they're something, but are they really? And then he does something amazing. He says, put them together in a scale. Put them together on a scale, the high and the low. Put humanity on the scale, and it doesn't go down, it goes up. Because it's a vapor, a breath, a mist, a delusion. Put all of them on a scale, and it rises. This is not David being cynical about people. It's not telling you people do not matter. But it is bringing definition and clarity to what human beings are designed to be and what they're not designed to be. And humans are not designed to anchor a soul. When you make a person your refuge or your glory, you've not honored them. You've assigned them a job that they can never fulfill or accomplish. And you've guaranteed the collapse of the wall that you're leaning on. The person who anchors their soul in another human being cannot love that human being. They can only need them, monitor them, manage them, grip them. And the relationship will ultimately bend under a weight it was never meant to carry. Your spouse cannot be your savior. Your child cannot justify your life. It's not love. It's extraction wearing love's mask. And this is how our world functions. This is what we're looking for. I know it's an old reference, but you remember the Jerry Maguire movie? It was the famous line, "You complete me. You complete me." And that's what every Hallmark movie, every rom-com, where's the one? Where's the one, my soulmate? Where's the one that's going to satisfy me, complete me, rescue me, give me meaning, give me everything that my heart is hungering for? You complete me is an absolute formula for failure. Because they're just human. They're going to disappoint you. They're going to let you down. They're going to break your heart. Not God. We're made to find our identity, our satisfaction, our meaning, our value in Him. David says, listen, if you're looking for it in people, good luck. You're not only going to damage yourself, you're going to end up damaging them in the process. That's not love. Then he goes to the second, which is wealth. He says, put no trust in extortion. So extortion, the word means unjust gain through the systemic exploitation of leverage. Put no trust in extortion. Set no vain hopes on robbery. The word there means the outright seizure by force. So he says, if you can't find security and trust in unjust gain or power, and see some of you, like me, you go, oh, that's not me because I don't extort a lot of people. And I haven't robbed anybody. So I'm going to be okay. And then he goes here, and it's interesting how it goes. If riches increase, set not your heart on them. David says, if riches increase. So if your riches increase not through extortion or robbery, it's not stolen wealth, it's increased wealth, the legitimately earned kind, the kind that is abundant in this room, set not your heart on it. We live in a time and an age and a culture of unprecedented wealth. And the blessing can become a burden so quickly. The moment that we think our retirement account or our Bitcoin or our portfolio is what makes us secure. Set not your heart on riches. It is too a formula for failure. I think all of us in the culture that we inhabit, we have to constantly be asking ourselves this reflective question: do I own my possessions, or do my possessions own me? What is the relationship I have to the things that God has granted unto me? Do I use them as a steward, enjoy them, and use them meaningfully as God's imager, or am I ultimately owned by them? Part of how we answer that question is asking ourselves questions like this, like what settles your soul? What do you reach for when you feel anxious? What is it that you tell yourself, if I could just have this, then I'd be okay? David says people and possessions, good in of themselves, are not substantial enough to give the glory that only God can give. They're vapors. They can't sustain the human heart that was made for God. So then he concludes this psalm with this proverb, a wisdom formulation. Once God has spoken, twice I have heard this. It's not that he's this is poetic, right? So the point is, he's not going to tell us two things. He's going to tell us one thing that's so important, that's so substantial, that you're going to have to say it a couple of times to actually understand it, right? Once God has spoken, twice I've heard this thing, that power belongs to God, and that to you, O Lord, belongs steadfast love. A single truth so important that a single hearing is never sufficient. Power belongs to God. Faithful love belongs to God. It's not a random declaration of two of God's attributes. This is the summarization of God's foundational self-revelation in Exodus, that in his covenant reality with his people. God is sovereign, God is powerful, and God is loving and faithful and loyal. Both are required in order for us to still our souls before God. Right? Like both are required. If God is only powerful but loving, not loving, you can't be still in front of that. Because it means, man, he can help, but will he? He can deliver, but does he want to? So if God is just powerful but not faithful, you can never be still or quiet before him. You can only brace yourself. Now, there's no resting in a God that's absolutely loving and not powerful. A God who sympathizes but cannot rescue will not quiet or still or rest your soul. This is the heart of the psalm, the heart of why we can still our souls in God. We can pour ourselves out to God because he alone is strong enough to handle it, and he alone is good enough, loving enough, faithful enough that we can trust him with our hearts. We can still our souls before God. We can hope only in him. Why? Because he is sovereign and he is loving. He's powerful and he's faithful. Which brings us to the very last line of the psalm. For you will render to a man according to his work. Now, that almost sounds a little bit jarring, almost like a little bit of a threat. It's not a threat. It's actually the promise of freedom. Here's the logic. If power belongs to God and steadfast love and faithfulness belongs to God, then outcomes belong to God. That we read, you will render to a man according to his work. And in our narcissistic reality, we go, oh, I better get to... No, the emphasis is on the first part. The God of all power, the God of faithful love, is the one that will render out according to what we have done. And what David is telling us to do in this psalm is what? Hope in him. Pour out our heart to him. Still and silence our soul, that we might look to God and God alone for our salvation. God is the true giver of salvation and hope, and we can still our souls and trust in his power and his love, leaving the results in his hand. This is why David can say, in the midst of it, I will not be shaken. Circumstances around are chaotic. I'm still hiding in the wilderness. My son is still trying to kill me. My hope is in God. My hope is in God. I couldn't help this week, but time and time again, as I was working through this text, be drawn to think about Jesus. Not because it's my job, but because this psalm so beautifully points to him. Jesus, across the scope of his life, illustrates the reality of the psalm that we just read, Psalm 62. Jesus shows us what a stilled and quieted soul before God looks like. He shows us. It kind of frames Gethsemane in a different way. Jesus is about to be betrayed with a kiss. Is there a better example of blessing with their lips but cursing with their heart? Jesus is about to be turned over, and he goes and he invites his three besties to come and pray with him, and they zonk out and fall asleep. The enemy, the evil one, the adversary is coming out at him with his full force. Jesus is sweating blood. You thought you were having a bad day. See, that's the beauty of Christ's example for us. He knows. He's able to sympathize with us in our weakness. Jesus knows what it's like to be shaken, to have all the things around you be shaken. And Jesus goes to the Father. He's like, hey, maybe we could do something else. But, see, this is the prayer of a soul stilling itself. Not my will, but yours be done. Goes and wakes up the bros. Come on, man. They zonk out again. He doesn't. Goes and wakes them up. He's like, all right, we got to go. We got to go. And Judas comes to him to kiss him. And what does Jesus do? He lets him. Peter's not having it. He pulls out a sword, starts lopping off ears. Jesus like, put the sword away. Heals the ear. Heals the ear of the very people coming to arrest and destroy him. That is what a soul that has stilled itself in God looks like. And then he's put on trial. He's betrayed, he's arrested, he's beaten, he's mocked. And false witnesses are all brought in, all trying to tear him down with falsehood, with lies. He doesn't respond. He says not a word. Then they drag him before Pilate. Matthew 27, Jesus stood before the governor, and the governor asked him, are you the king of the Jews? And Jesus said, well, you said it. But when he was accused by the chief priests and elders, he gave no answer. I don't know about you. I hate it when people lie about me. I hate falsehoods. I hate betrayal. And when somebody says something about me that's not true, everything in me needs to correct it, to fix it. I don't think I'm the only one in the room that feels this way. You don't think Jesus felt that in the moment? As the very ones that he came to save are betraying him, as the one that is the way, the truth, and the life is being lied about. But his hope isn't in what those people think about him. His hope, not my will, but yours be done. He gave no answer. And Pilate said to him, do you not hear how many things they testify against you? Pilate's trying to get Jesus to defend himself. Don't you hear what they're saying? But he gave him no answer, not even to a single charge, so that the governor, Pilate, was greatly amazed. He was greatly amazed. That image is just so beautiful and striking to me. Not Jesus standing up and defending himself and calling out the falsehoods and establishing the truth. And that wouldn't have amazed Pilate. That's what Pilate expected. That's what the world does. That's what sin and pride does. What was amazing about Jesus, what amazed Pilate about Jesus, was the settledness of his soul and his hope in God, not in controlling the circumstances around him. And church, that's the example that we are called to follow. Verses 39 to 43, those who passed by derided him, wagging their heads. That's one of my favorite little phrases. Wagging their heads, calling out like these untruths about him. And the response of Jesus, well, Isaiah actually prophesied the response of Jesus 750 years before it happened. He was oppressed and he was afflicted, yet he opened not his mouth. Like a lamb led to the slaughter, like a sheep that before its shearers is silent. So he opened not his mouth. This is the example of a true imager, of true faith and true hope, looking not to control that which only God controls, and looking to God alone to be our salvation. You say, well, it didn't work out that well for Jesus because they killed him. They did. As mind-boggling as it is, that was the plan. But that doesn't mean that Jesus' hope failed, because it's not the end of the story. He stayed silent. He stayed trusting. He put himself in God's care, and he died. But that's not the end of the story, because God rose him from the dead. So he will not be shaken. Right? This is the example for us. I know it's not what you want to hear, because I know it's not what I want to hear. I want to hear, if I still my soul, then everything's going to work out the way that I want it to. That's not what David is saying. That's not what the scripture is calling us to. It's saying, if you will still your soul, everything will work out the way that God wants it to. And at the end of the day, that's going to be better than what you could have imagined. So, church, I want to encourage you this week. Pray Psalm 62 every day. If you can, start your day with it. Start your day by settling the question, who am I looking to? What am I hoping in? Where does my glory come from? Let the psalm bring you in to the stillness of soul that we were made for. Amen.